Hello, welcome to Sci Fi Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. I am back today with another classic sci-fi book review. So get your commenting fingers ready to send me a weird message because I'm totally on board for it and honestly it makes my week. So I am reviewing Jack Vance's The Last Castle by 1966, which came out in 1966 from Ace Books. It is, as I said, a classic sci-fi. I picked this up a couple weeks ago and I just knew right away I had to read it. So I'm going to do a non-spoiler review first, and then I'm going to jump into my classic sci-fi bingo where I go through some of the things in the book in more detail. First Castle Halcyon fell, then Sea Island, then Morning Light, then Maraval. One by one, with their gauze-clad fanes, ancient books, and subtle essences, the proud castles of Earth fell before the rebellious Meeks, until only Castle Hagedorn was left. For 700 years, the Meeks had served without complaint. They were indispensable, for no true gentleman would demean himself with the indignity of toil. Now, for no discernible reason, they were about to destroy the genteel civilization of Earth. I can get behind that. But the cultural aristocrats were too proud to lower themselves by dealing with the Mech rebellion. Even as their turrets crumbled around them, they chose to remain dignified and aloof. Someone had to do something. Hagedorn was the last castle. So, at 107 pages, this is pretty much a novella. As such, while it's a quick read with an extensive and interesting world build, it felt a little bit rushed. We're not in the story long enough to make it hard-hitting or really become immersed. The main character isn't particularly memorable. In fact, I cannot remember his name. But this is kind of a staple of the older Vance novels. You have these pretty generic dudes who are there as the vehicle within which to show you the world that Vance has created. As I said, the world building here is great. We have a post-apocalyptic Earth that was abandoned centuries ago and recolonized by humans. They brought with them these enslaved aliens, and the aliens have now decided to put up a fight. They've been taking out these castles, where these humans have set up camp, basically, as the world also has these raiders who have lived there since the original fall and a few other things. In truth, the more you think about this book in terms of like the technology and the feasibility of some of the stuff, the less sense it kind of makes nowadays. But the ideas behind the novel of rebellion from the wealthy elite specifically are something that I can still get behind. So this book is fun. Yet it's hard to care about the aliens or the humans because we don't get a lot of time with any of them. We barely see anyone, and the one human we do see spends most of his time gallivanting around trying to figure out whether the aliens are attacking or not when we know they are from the back cover of the book. Yet the story is interesting and keeps you reading because it's so weird, and so much of it you have to extrapolate for yourself. It's a comment on elitism, the wealthy, classism, and the human capacity to use others for our own ends. It's definitely a warning, one we clearly haven't taken, if we look at the world today, 60 years later, for example. Ore made a desperate gesture. A similar thought haunts me. Death, what of that? All must die. But when I think of my precious belongings, I become sick. My books trampled, my fragile vases smashed, my tabards ripped, my rugs buried, my fanes strangled, my heirloom chandeliers flung aside. These are my nightmares. Yeah. Overall, if you love Vance, you'll likely enjoy this book, and despite the flat characters, I can understand why this bad boy won the Nebula and the Hugo. It's incredibly detailed and creative. It has a fantastic opening line as well that I'm going to read to you as a little bit of a wrap-up. Toward the end of a stormy summer afternoon, with the sun finally breaking out under ragged black rain clouds, Castle Genial was overwhelmed and its population destroyed. What a sweet way to start a book. So yeah, that's my opinion on this book. I really liked it. I didn't love it. But now I'm going to jump into my classic sci-fi bingo where I'm going to do some spoilers. So if you haven't read this yet, you had about 60 years to do so. You better get on that before you watch this. So, outdated science. Radio is really the only method of communication in this book, which is pretty outdated for the future. A main part of the plot is Buddy traveling from his castle to another castle to see what is going on and then coming back. I mean, if they just had internet or any kind of phone line, this wouldn't have been part of the story. So definitely outdated science. A spaceship blows up. No, though the mechs do ground the spaceships at the one castle. So yeah, and the castle, by the way, if you didn't pick that up from the from my review or from because you haven't read this, the castles are like huge cities. They're not really just like medieval castles. They're big cities with spaceports and things like that. Social changes. Okay, so not really. Society still functions as we always have under a capitalist kind of society, I suppose. Sexy female scientists. No, there are barely any women in this book. Cool aliens. Yes, we have a bunch of really cool aliens for such a small book. So I'm going to read them because that's what I do. So first we have the mechs. These are the ones that are fighting back. The mech, standing as if a specimen in a museum case, was a man-like creature native in its original version to the planet of Etamin. His tough, rust-bronze hide glistened metallically as if oiled or waxed. The spines thrusting back from scalp and neck shone like gold, and indeed were coated with a conductive copper-chrome film. His sense organs were gathered in clusters at the site of a man's ears. His visage was corrugated muscle, not dissimilar to the look of an uncovered human brain. His maw, vertical irregular cleft at the base of this face, was an obsolete organ by reason of the syrup sac which had been introduced under the skin of the shoulders, the digestive organs originally used to extract nutrients from decayed swamp vegetation and coelacentrates had atrophied. And then it talks about what they wear and talks about kind of who they are. They're interesting. I've never really heard of a creature in a sci-fi book that looks like this before. We also have the peasants. The peasants were small andromorphs, originally of Spica 10, were not so much timid as incapable of performing a vicious act. They're just kind of, I don't know, they don't do a lot. Then we have the power wagons, which I thought was really wild. Power wagons, like the mechs, originally swamp creatures from Edaman 9, were great rectangular slabs of muscle, slung into a rectangular frame and protected from sunlight, insects, and rodents by a synthetic pelt. Syrup sacs communicated with their digestive apparatus. Wires led to motor nodes in the rudimentary brain. The muscles were clamped to rocker arms, which accentuated rotors and drive wheels. The power wagons, economical, long-lived, and docile, were principally used for heavy cartage, earth-moving, heavy tillage, and other arduous jobs. So they're like sentient slab of meat, I guess. Are they sentient? I don't know. And then we also have the birds, which are just giant talking birds that people used to cart themselves and other things around. They were kind of like funny. And then we have the fanes. Possibly half of the gentlemen, but less than a quarter of the ladies, kept fanes. These were creatures native to the caverns of Elberio VII's moon, a docile race, both playful and affectionate, which after several thousand years of selective breeding had become sliffs of piquant beauty. Clad in a delicate gauze which issued from pores behind their ears, along their upper arms and down their backs, they were the most inoffensive of creatures, anxious always to please, innocently vain. Most gentlemen regarded them with affection, but rumors sometimes told of ladies drenching an especially heated fane in tincture of ammonia, which melted their pelt and destroyed her gauze forever. There's an interesting thing about the fanes here, interesting and kind of weird. A gentleman besotted by a fane was considered a figure of fun. The fane, though so carefully bred as to seem a delicate girl, if used sexually, became crumpled and haggard, with gauzes drooping and discolored, and everyone would know that such and such a gentleman had misused his fane. So the thing is, though, it doesn't seem like that's a crime to do that to somebody, to sexually assault them. I don't know. It seemed very, very weird to me. And yeah, I guess that the thing is, though, that's part of this wealthy elite. Obviously, they enslave these people that they see as less than human, and then they use them in ways that they feel has no repercussions because they have no sense of conscience, I guess. And that's kind of the argument I think he's trying to show. Anyway, we don't have any alien-human romance. I guess, see, that doesn't count in my opinion. All the way to cyberpunk, we don't have anything like that. For sexism, I mean, yes, there are no women leaders at all. Okay, that's kind of sexist. And then we have the fanes, as I said, they're treated like property, and they're kind of around to amuse the human men. There's also barely any human women in the novel. We get one, Glice Widow Meadowsweet. Glice, I don't know. Picking berries, which is something only unmarried women do, apparently, which I thought was kind of funny. I'm like, why? There is something on page 80 that made me laugh. Okay. The girl shrugged, and Xanthan could not be sure whether she was pleased or not. Compliments from gentlemen sometimes setting the stage for sorry aftermath. See, society has not changed. Other than that, so we don't have anything from Forerunner technology all the way to microfiche. Unfortunately, no microfiche. The male MC is a dick. Xanthan, I mean, he's a rich guy. He doesn't use his status to take advantage of that girl he meets. He learns his lesson in the end about being wealthy and a jerk, and decides his people will no longer enslave random aliens. So that's good, I guess. I mean, the bare minimum of not being a dick, the absolute bare minimum. So, okay. There is no racial equality in this book. Future weapons, yes, energy guns and spaceships. There we go. And it is post-apocalyptic. So it explains... After the Six Star War, Earth had lain fallow for 3,000 years, unpopulated save for a handful of anguished wretches who somehow had survived the cataclysm and who had become semi-barbaric nomads. Then 700 years ago, certain rich lords of Altair, motivated to some extent by political disaffection, but no less by caprice, had decided to return to Earth. Such was the origin of the 9 great strongholds, etc., etc. Yeah, so they came back. And... so there's 2 other groups. So aside from the castles, there's the nomad people, which are basically raiders. And then there's another group of people who have left the castles because they're dissatisfied with how things are run there. So these people, they call them, I can't remember, expatriaries or something like that. It's a very long word, basically meaning expats, and they have just like kind of moved into a more kind of pastoral life. And that was really interesting to me because these people refused to take part in defending the castles, but they also aren't doing anything to defend the mechs, so they were just kind of like sitting back from it. And I thought that was an interesting kind of thing to bring into it because it doesn't get a ton of focus, but it was interesting to show these kind of different, because I can't remember, but I think he somehow convinces the raiders to join forces with him by bribing them. Yeah, but it's it's an interesting book. There's also a very funny line. Hetmen, yeah, that's what the Hetmen were the raiders. So the Hetmen's grin never wavered. You are not men. Only we of earth soil and earth water are men. You and your weird slaves are strangers together. We wish you success in your mutual slaughter. So yeah, they definitely don't want any part of this. And yeah, there's nothing from Assassins to the Bechdel test. So yeah, no bingo here, but a fun book regardless. If you have a chance to check this book out, I do recommend it. It is pretty wild and pretty interesting, and also really, really short. I think I read it in like an hour. So yeah, another hit from from Jack Vance here, my boyfriend. Yeah, I love Jack Vance. Yeah, I wish he was alive so I could go boating with him. I think I say this every time I review a book of his. I need to review some different authors, I guess. I'm going to be reviewing next The Stainless Steel Rat, as I promised. I'll be throwing that one out in October, and then I might even do a second one in October because I don't have a lot on my TBR for October yet, so I might actually throw in maybe Tornado Alley. I don't know. Thanks.